I think, Professor
Sorry,
Morandi,
Pepe.
you may mention the difference between the way that the Qatari defense system has responded to Israel's attack and comparing to what it did during the war between Iran and Israel. They were helping Israel each and every way possible, and today we've learned they used nothing against these.
And how did the airplanes get there?
Yeah.
How did they get there?
From within.
How did all of it's either one of two things. Either the Saudis and the others were complicit, or all those weapons that they purchased for hundreds of billions of dollars, for trillions of dollars, are useless junk. In other words, the Americans have just ripped them off and they cannot even protect themselves. Sorry, Pepe.
Pepe, let's change the tone to to facilitate your process.
Man, this is so depressing. You have no idea, both of you and our audience. Do you know why I want to change the subject? Because I want to talk about things that are not depressing. Exactly the opposite. Okay. So once again, a toast to my friend Mao. And let's backtrack to last week. You know what I have been doing these past few days? I have been between Russia and China. Obviously, it's the future. So I left NATO stand to go to Tianjin, but I only had a few hours because my flight from Beijing to Vladivostok, I had to go back to the airport to make it to Vladivostok. So I saw a little bit of the SCO summit, not too much, but at least I got the feel of Tianjin and the feel of the summit. So between Sunday and Monday, we had the SCO summit, which was the mirror equivalent of the BRICS summit in Kazan last year in Russia. BRICS last year, they stepped up and they start to show, okay, what we're all about. The SCO this year, they did exactly the same thing, including some of the major players on both. And that's where we get to the absolutely extraordinary scenes between the former Primakov Triangle, Russia, India, and China, RIC, where we have the leaders talking to each other, holding hands, and laughing in the corridors, and making jokes about you know who, probably. So this was the image that went all over the global south, where it was met with glee, of course, and in the global north with what else? You know, spasms of desperation. Of course. How come RIC are talking like this, you know, so chummy with each other? So this was just the first 2 days. Nobody knew what would happen the next day, which was even more important. Vladimir Putin gets to Beijing, comes here to Beijing, is received at the Zhonghanai, official residence of the presidency of China, former imperial palace. If you have an audience at the Zhonghanai and a private conversation at Zhonghanai, this is the top of the top of the top of the top level. Nothing is topper than that. So Putin and Xi on Tuesday, the day after the end of the SCO in Tianjin, they reviewed the Russia-China strategic partnership in detail. And that was the preparation for the day after, where we had the parade once again here, 80 years of the victory against Japanese aggression and the Asian chapter of Nazi fascism, including, of course, something that nobody in the bloody West knows, the staggering amount of Chinese victims could be as much as 20 million in the war. Nobody in the West, apart from a few scholars, know about this in detail. And of course, it was not a show off by the Chinese. It was basically a self-confident superpower for the first time, showing what they have in case they are attacked. Oh, you want to attack us? Okay, bring it on. We are ready. This was the very polite, sophisticated message in a parade choreographed to perfection. Absolutely impeccable, so rich. So I went to an exhibition this weekend on the Dunhuang cultural and art, the Mogao caves. The refinement that you see in a culture that can stage an exhibition about the early centuries of the Silk Road. In fact, such finesse, so profound. It was replicated in a sense in this parade that was a beautiful thing to watch, and it was not aggressive, even with all those lethal weapons being paraded. It was not aggressive at all, and in fact ended with that. I would say even a childish, playful game of having fighter jets design 80 in the blue skies over Beijing on that day. So there was something absolutely startling to watch. And I'm here for 4 days now, so I had time to talk to some people in Beijing, and people were amazed, and at the same time, which was something that we were discussing only a few minutes ago before I joined you guys in our dinner. One of the scholars told me, we were very insecure before. We're not self-confident enough. And the Chinese had a sort of inferiority complex vis-a-vis the West. But maybe we're starting to surpass it. Maybe we're getting to the next level. And what happened between Tianjin and the parade in Beijing in a matter of 2 days, that was the auspicious part of I was trying to impress to you, and I hope to our audience. And I was deeply moved because I couldn't see the parade because I made a choice to be at the Vladivostok Forum. I think it was the right decision, because then what I saw in Vladivostok after these few hours in Tianjin during the whole week was as startling as what happened in Tianjin and in Beijing. I saw essentially the Russian leadership fully committed not only to develop the Arctic and the Far East, the whole gigantic east of Siberia area, but now they are creating a new logistics corridor. They are creating a logistics corridor for Northeast Asia, what the Chinese appropriately define as the Arctic Silk Road. The Russian denomination, Northern Sea Route, is the Chinese denomination is catchy, and it gives you the spirit and the dream built in conquering the Arctic, conquering Siberia, finally turning it into a connectivity corridor. And it's the connectivity corridor of the 21st century, the connectivity corridor of the future. So the most important roundtables in Vladivostok is an exceptional forum. Only if you go there, you understand. Because you see everybody that lives east of the Urals represented, including the native populations, the original populations. You see provincial governors, you see the heads of the big corporations that are investing in the eastern part of Russia, which is that it's gigantic, 10 times bigger than Europe. And you can talk to them and you can see them if they believe in this dream, which is the Russian equivalent of what the Chinese started to do in 1999 with their Go West campaign, which was basically to expand development to Tibet and Xinjiang, especially. The Russians are doing what the Chinese did from east to west, the Russians are doing from west to east, which is the Arctic and the Far East, and to invest as much as they can, turn it into high-tech economies in all these different oblasts, and at the same time create conditions. For instance, in some of the roundtables, there were lots of South Korean businessmen, not only Russians and Chinese. South Koreans were there as well. Mongolians were there as well. Mongolians for obvious reasons, because the power of Siberia too. The announcement that they clinched the deal, the announcement came during the Vladivostok Forum. So this is the oil and gas which Siberia and the Arctic have in spades, plus the connectivity corridor, which is, how can you establish a connectivity corridor in the Arctic? Because you need a fleet of nuclear icebreakers. Who's the only country on the planet who has a fleet of nuclear icebreakers? 8 already on, 2 being built, another 2 in the pipeline, not to mention the other ones which are not nuclear. This means 365 days a week, 24/7, this connectivity corridor will be on perhaps by 2026, 2027. So in one of the, just to give an idea, in one of the panels, the CEO of Rosatom, which is the nuclear state company in Russia, he gave a half-an-hour detailed breakdown of what they're planning to do and the challenges as well, including we need to find money for all that. It's not only because the federal government is deeply implicated, because Putin considers this also a personal project. He's personally implicated. He sees this as a matter of national security and the great development project for Russia in the 21st century. This is enormous, enormous. So, you know, the first part of the plenary, for instance, Friday, past Friday was the plenary session. Putin, of course, gives his speech. The first part of his speech was about that. And then he comes to the clincher. And the clincher is, he has this beautiful formulation, the Trans-Arctic Corridor. The Trans-Arctic Corridor is going to be the Suez Canal of the 21st century. And the Russians are in the lead, and the Russians are building it. Of course, the Chinese want to get into the actions. The South Koreans want to get into the action. Even the North Koreans as well. Kim Jong-un and Putin, they also talked about the Arctic Silk Road when they met face to face. So this is the whole auspicious game, which is in direct contrast with what Muhammad explained brilliantly, which, you know, our reaction as not as geopolitical analysts, as human beings, is this is beyond depressing. Is there a solution? Yes, there is. We all know what the solution is. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen. To get rid of this death cult, the thing is, how the planet is going to get rid of the death cult is not going to be the UN. I'm sorry, it's not going to be an extraordinary BRICS meeting like we had yesterday, which was pretty lame, to tell you the truth. Although we didn't have what Putin said. That was particularly interesting. The Kremlin vetoed that Putin's words should circulate. So he probably said something very, very hardcore, and the Kremlin prefers to keep it under wraps. So we saw what Lula said, platitudes, I'm sorry. We saw what Xi Jinping said, also platitudes, I'm sorry. But Putin probably said the real deal, and we don't know what it was. But it was probably a call to arms, metaphorically, for BRICS, like, guys, now we need to get our act together. Otherwise, they're going to come after all of us one by one, which is what the Americans are already doing it. And BRICS partners as well. There's a color revolution going on in Indonesia as we speak. There's a color revolution started in Nepal as we speak. So at least I prefer to leave you, all of you, our audience, with this extraordinary, auspicious Russia, China, Eurasia wide week last week, which this one changed the rules of the game. The game now is on a whole new level. The Americans have absolutely no idea how this is going to proceed. The only thing, for instance, that registers in the mind of the circus ringmaster in Washington is, maybe we can do a lot of new deals with Russia. Try to get new deals with Rosatom or even with Rosneft. I confirmed this in Vladivostok. ExxonMobil and Rosneft, they have been talking for 6 months already over the possibility of coming back to the Sakhalin gas project and other investments in oil and gas in Russia. So try to get American oligarchy, essentially, to do business with the Russian oligarchy again without solving all the major problems in the Russia-US strategic or non-strategic partnership, including the subtext, which happens to be the war in Ukraine. It's not going to happen. But this is the only thing that registers in Trump's mind. In fact, Trump wants to continue to talk to Putin because let's open the Arctic for American business. Forget it. If you don't make serious concessions, which you won't, because the deep state then will literally put a bullet in your neck, it's not going to happen. But the Russians are masters of